Good morning, everyone. I'm Washington Mio, chair of the FSU Mathematics Department. So I'd like to welcome you all to this is the 2021 Financial Mathematics Quant Symposium. And this is its 23rd iteration. Right? So this is an annual event that was previously known as the Financial Math Festival, but it was renamed a few years ago, perhaps to better reflect the nature of the meeting or to adapt to current trends. But in any case, the symposium is very important and meaningful to our financial math program. And I can certainly tell you that, over the years, it's had a really major impact on the professional development of our students. So my deepest appreciation goes to the organizers, all supporters of the event, and especially the outside speakers, because they share their time and bring a very important real-world kind of perspective of financial math to our students. So thank you very much. Your contribution is really, really appreciated. So now I'll just conclude by wishing you all a very enjoyable and productive meeting.
Oh, okay, thank you, Washington. So originally, Dean Sam Hackabus was supposed to here to give a welcome remark, but maybe he had some travel conflict like in the last minute and couldn't join. So I basically will just welcome everyone to the 23rd symposium, and also because we are running a little bit late, so I'll start introducing the first speaker. So we are very happy to have Dr. Jing Zhou today. So Dr. Zhou has a distinguished career. So she's currently managing director at the Royal Bank of Canada. And prior to that, she worked at Goldman, Wells Fargo, and Fannie Mae. And so she had a PhD degree in applied computational math from Princeton. And I know some people there. It's a very nice program, and it's definitely a good one. And so she graduated from Xi'an Jiaotong University. So I think we already made you a co-host. If you want to share screen,
So as a host, disabled participant screen sharing, probably because I get into through Lingling's a Zoom link. So if you can maybe enable me share screen.
Oh, sure. Sure. I think I clicked the share screen. But if you have some trouble, Heather can help with the technical side.
Okay.
You should be able to share now.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, and can you see the screen?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and so a lot of people ask me to admit them to the host to the room.
Oh, you can ignore that. We will.
Sorry about that. I've got that.
Okay, got you. Thanks. So, okay. I don't know how do I set it for full screen.
You can just click the presentation button down at the bottom. It's like the little screen icon. One more. There you go. Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, thanks everyone for coming on this Saturday morning for my talk. And so today I'm going to talk about model risk management for pricing models. It automatically goes. So just a little bit background. My talk is not going to focus very much on the quant aspect, but in general, it will talk about model risk and specifically how we do model validation. As we know, model validation is a very big area where we actually use a lot of quantitative skills. So I will just focus on model risk to give you a more big picture about model risk and validation. So the screen actually automatically goes to next one. It's weird. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about model risk and what is the pricing model. Then I'm going to talk about model risk framework, 3 lines of defense, and the model lifecycle management. And then we are going to talk about how do we conduct a model validation. We have a group of model validation doing all kinds of models that I will talk about later. And then outcome of model validation. So that's the outline of today's talk. So what is a pricing model? So first, we want to step back and ask, what is a model? Based on the Fed guidance, SR 11.7, a model is a quantitative method, system, or approach that applies statistical, economic, financial, or mathematical theories, techniques, and assumptions to process the input data to quantitative estimates. So a model can cover a lot of different areas. So for example, the model I cover interest rate derivative models, securitized products models. Those are like traditional in the pricing model area. Beyond that, I also cover a lot of mortgage loan models, revenue forecast models, insurance models. So models actually is a great way to see, how mathematical skills or statistical skills can be applied in the financial area. So as Dr. Zhu introduced, I actually have been in a lot of different quantitative areas. So I've been in the front desk quant, also risk quant, and now I'm in the model validation quant. I think the unique benefit of being a model validation quant is I can see a lot of different areas of models so that I can use a lot of different variety of mathematical skills for that. So far, I really enjoy doing it. So given the SR 11.7 models, what we have seen is, ever since the financial crisis, the regulators, especially Federal Reserve, they put a lot of emphasis on the model risk. So what you see is model validation before the crisis was a really small function. Now, typically in some banks, it will include like hundreds of people. My bank has like over 100 people doing model validation work, but I know like JP Morgan or Wells Fargo, they have like over 300 people in the model risk area. So that's like has been a really growing area for the last decade. Now it's kind of reached a plateau. So specifically today, I'm going to more mention like about pricing models. So pricing model, we typically talk about they use to compute the price, the P&L, and risk sensitivities of product. For example, it can evaluate the price of product, especially for securities, which we cannot see the observable market price. It can use to calculate the P&L under normal and stress conditions. And then they can compute risk sensitivities. The trader can use them to actively manage their positions. So any questions so far? Okay. So we've seen pricing models using a lot of different markets. So typically they are associated different types of product type. For example, in interest rate, equities, credit, FX, commodities, and securitized products. They're using a lot of different techniques. I think, majority of them, they are using a lot of derivative pricing models, cash flow models. And for securitized products, it gets fancier because they use prepayment models, use a lot of statistics. So those are, covering different mathematical techniques. A few examples of pricing risk models could including, for example, a fixed rate bond models, which is used to compute risk sensitivities of P&L for fixed rate bonds. So those are typically basic cash flow models. And then we go to a fancier in the mathematics. We saw How-White model, which is a term structure model that typically use trees to simulate interest rate paths in the future. And then we use them a lot to compute the callable bond and Bermuda swaptions. And then finally, you have prepayment model that seems very different in terms of mathematical techniques. They use a lot of statistics, and then parameter calibrations to predict the prepayment speed for mortgage-backed securities. So those are a few examples of the pricing and the risk models. Any questions so far?
Yeah, actually, I have a quick question. So, I understand that a How-White model is a very specific model, but for prepayment, it's kind of like a prepayment risk, right? So when you say the prepayment model, you mean a particular a classic model that everybody uses in prepayment. Or, I mean, my understanding is that prepayment is something you want to model, like there's no standard like single model for prepayment.
Right. So prepayment. So if you look back on the whole agency mortgage-backed securities, it actually has a suite of models. What you would do is typically you would have like underlying. They have, for example, BGM model, term structure model, to simulate the interest path over the next 30 years. For example, for the 30-year mortgage-backed security products, and then at every simulation path, they would have a mortgage rate model to decide at each point of the path what's the predicted mortgage rate would be. And that actually feeds into the prepayment model. So prepayment is a model which use, it's very complicated, has a rate refinance, housing turnover, and then a credit default component, a lot of different components, and housing turnover. So they have like 3 or 4 different components where they have built statistical models to predict the prepayment speed. And then in total, all this actually feeds into the like agency MBS models, which would compute the sensitivities and manage this prepayment risk. So it's like a really suite of models.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, typically I think from a quant program, a lot of people actually focus on derivative pricing and the statistics. Prepayment speed is really a very special areas where you need a lot of expertise or experience on adjusting prepayment model. They have like hundreds of parameters based on human judgment, and then based on what we observed about how good the model can predict the prepayment speed. So hope that answers your question.
Right, thank you. Yeah, because my understanding is prepayment is very complicated, and so people use a lot of statistics instead of some like math models to model it because it's too complicated for mathematics.
Right. That's true. Yeah, but a lot of quants also work in that area. If they are working on the agency MBS products, they work on the prepayment models too. Okay, so if no more questions, I go to next. Okay, so in terms of model risk, we can think of model risk as composed of 3 lines of defense. So the first line is a model business and development owner. So in the common language, it's who wants this model from the business side, and then the modelers who are actually developing these models. So that's the first line. And then second line would be model risk management, where my function is. So we actually will review their models and identify any errors and ask them to fix it. And finally, we have internal audit, who is on top of the both first line and second line. So they would examine both practices on the modeler side and on the model risk side, and then identify any potential problems. So all the 3 lines will report to the senior management committee, who would eventually report to the company's board. So those are the 3 lines of defense. So if we talk about model risk and who is responsible for model risk, the answer would be all 3 lines of defense are responsible for that. So the first line needs to make sure they build a good model, and we are here to challenge them, and the internal audit is going to challenge both sides. Any questions? So now I want to talk about the first line of defense in the model risk. So for each of the lines, we have different roles and responsibilities. So the first line, the model development owner and the model business owner. So they are responsible for identify business needs to develop models, meaning, why do we want to build the models? Are they used for pricing specific products they want to trade? Are they providing the valuation for things? Maybe provide risk management. So typically a case is a model, the traders would come to the quant and tell them, we want to trade this product. Can you please build a model for us so that we can start trading? So that's a very typical case for that. And then the quant is going to develop models, conduct testing, and then write a model white paper. Sorry, I think somehow it's automatic goes next page. And then once they have everything done, they will submit for model validation, and then remediate any model issues. They are the one who is responsible for setting up the model performance tracking, identify any models in use, and establish the control from first line, and set up the model release control. So they actually, have a lot of responsibilities. So all this actually are defined in the model risk policy. So that's from the first line point of view. Any questions? So then we're going to move to the second line. The second line model risk is basically us. So if you look at model risk, it's typically composed of two pillars, the model validation and the model governance. So model validation is basically a group of quants. So we have a lot of math or statistical technology background, so analytical background too. So we are responsible for conducting the model reviews, and we'll do our independent testing, and eventually we'll write the review report. And then periodically we'll review the model performance tracking results, and then to look at if the model release has been controlled properly. So that's pretty much the validation responsibility. And then model governance, they are typically not quants. So they are, a lot of them are from project management background. So what they are responsible is they manage the model risk policy and standards. They update the model inventory and then reporting model risk to the senior management and the board. So that's their responsibility. So any questions on this? Okay, so when a model comes in, what's the model life cycle? So I want to talk about it so you have an idea, how this model would flow. And so step number one is the planning of the model. So we have the business needs, and then they start to planning, including choosing, what methodology they are going to use, and then to socialize with traders to see if they are comfortable with the methodology. And then once they have the methodology in mind, the model is going to, Quant is going to start developing the models. And then in the meanwhile, when they develop models, they will do a lot of testing, and then eventually they are going to write in a white paper and submit to the validation for review. And then step number three is validation. So the Quant would, model validation Quant would start reviewing these methods. And then typically we'll think about, what are the different ways we can test this model, potentially break this model. So which we'll talk about later on in more details. And once model validation approve this model, we're actually going to put this model into release into the production. So then the traders and the risk managers, they can actually use this model. And in the meanwhile, they are going to monitor the model performance. Because when market condition changes, some models, who used to work properly would actually stop working, and they would have all kinds of problems. So that's why model monitoring is very important. And then from model risk point of view, we also ask models to be periodically reviewed. So periodic review, that means the modelers actually, they have to review their models usage, their materiality, their performance results, and submit annual assessment to the model validation. And then we are going to review them. So for example, in our company, every model has to be reviewed every year for the annual assessment, which is more like a light touch review. And periodically, maybe every 3, 4, 5 years, depending on the model risk rating, they will be thoroughly, fully validated. And then once we identify all this, everything will be reported out, including what kind of issues they have, whether they remediate all the issues in timely manner. And then as model goes, some model eventually will get retired. So that will be goes to step 8, the retirement of the model. So that's the full model risk life cycle. Any questions on that?
I have a question on that.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are saying development and release in production, are there other, at step 4, are there other people that comes in to write a special code which is more adapted? or do you just take directly the code that is done at step 2? Like, do you have additional manpower at step 4 for implementation in some sense?
So that's a good question. So step 4 typically needs IT's involvement, so it's not purely Quant's job. So what typically they do is they would have a production environment where everything has been already approved, and then when they develop new models, they will have a UAT, user acceptance test environment, where they do all the testing, and then where validation goes to do all the testing. And eventually they have to migrate the UAT into the production environment. So that's typically IT's job. So IT will be responsible for doing that. So once they put in the production, they will have to They have to do the comparison between the UAT and production, make sure it's migrated correctly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sure. So any other questions? Okay, I'll go to next page. So the key question and most important questions for Quant is, how do we conduct a model validation? So if you think about model validation, it really have 5 aspects. We have model overview, conceptual soundness, input assumptions, output testing, and monitoring process. Those are the big 5 areas that any model validation, meaning full validation, needs to go through. In terms of model overview, first we look at the model purpose and scope. So model purpose meaning, what is this model used for? A few potential purposes, including valuation and financial reporting. That means it computes the values for that product. Risk management, where we'll compute the Greeks of those products. That typically, are subject to some kind of risk limits controls from the market or counterparty credit risk. And regulatory reporting, that could compute risk-weighted assets, RWA, or have the CCAR stress testing results. And then stress testing, CCAR stress testing, collateral management, where we have a lot of collaterals and we want to know the price of it. And then evaluate clients' asset values. So those are different model purposes. Some purposes are much more important than others. For example, the valuation, financial reporting, and the regulatory reporting, typically those are very important usages, and we have to be really careful about it. And then others, like maybe evaluate the client's asset value, are not as important as those two. And then we have, a lot of relevant business usages. Typically, we look at the different business trading different products, but some models actually can be used in multiple different areas. Any questions on that? And then we talk about model risk rating. Model risk rating is very important because you want to, we have limited resources, right? And limited time, we want to focus our energies on the most important models. So that's why model risk rating is really crucial to us. So when we look at model risk rating, we normally look at from 2 different angles, the model materiality and uncertainty. Model materiality, basically we're asking questions like, how much is the relevant market value of growth exposure? How much does this model contribute to portfolio balance, regulatory capital, or CCAR results? And then is this model used for more important usage, like regulatory reporting or financial reporting? So all those gives you some sense of model materiality. And from another angle is model uncertainty. So model uncertainty, we ask, is this methodology inherently complicated? And do we have a lot of validation findings or self-identified issues that shows high uncertainty? And what are the compensating controls? So no model is perfect, right? We don't have any perfect models. All models has sort of problems. At the end of the day, we cannot really ask a model to address all the problems. And so we instead will want them to have compensating controls to around those shortcomings so that we still feel comfortable about using those models. So given this model materiality and the model uncertainty dimension, each would have high, medium, low, and then we'll combine them to decide the model risk rating overall. So typically we'll give model materiality, higher priority. So that would be a little bit more dominant dimension. So you would have the picture like below, depending on the materiality uncertainty, you would end up as different model risk rating. For example, if you have a high model materiality and the medium model uncertainty, you would have like high materiality. So why is model risk rating so important? So that depends on how periodically you will do the full validation of a model. So well, first the model comes in, we do initial validation. After that, depending on the model risk rating, if it's a high model risk rating, for example, different firms have different requirements. Like in my firm, every 3 years, we'll have to do a full validation for high risk rating, and then 4 years for the medium risk rating, and 5 years for the low risk rating. So that depends how much time we spend on it. Some examples of model risk rating could be, for example, the Hawaii model. When we look at the business, a lot of municipal bonds using Hawaii model, which is very significant in terms of market value of the percentage of the entire portfolio. So we rated this materiality as high, and then because the tree methodology, we think it's complicated, so uncertainty could be high. So overall speaking, the model risk rating would be high. And then for example, the agency MBS prepayment model, maybe the business doesn't have many portfolio, so then the materiality could be low. And then because the prepayment model is really complicated, so the uncertainty is high. And then overall speaking, we'll say the model risk rating is low. So those are 2 examples of how we assess model risk rating. Any questions? Okay. And then when we approve a model, it's very important to figure out, what are the approved model outputs and usages. So potentially the approved outputs could include in prices, P&L, and the risk sensitivities. But for each specific model, they may want to be approved for specific outputs. And then we also think about what are the model usages, right? And as I mentioned, there are financial reporting, risk management, regulatory, and stress testing. So when we validate each model, we clearly list what are the approved outputs, what are the approved model usages, and what is not approved, so that people wouldn't get confused about this. Okay, so after we talk about the model overview, next I'm going to talk about conceptual soundness. Like how do we evaluate the conceptual soundness of model? So essentially speaking, we evaluate them from 3 angles. We look at the model methodology, potentially calibration errors, and the variable selections. So a few questions to ask ourselves when we evaluate model methodology and structure is we actually want to know, how is the methodology chosen? Are there alternative methodologies? How did the modelers decide the final approach? So here, when we do validation, we typically would do some literature review to see, what other methodology out there, what are the pros and cons of different methodologies. And then the second question we ask is this mathematical formula or function form correctly reasonable? And then what is a computational methodology? Is that reasonable? Is there any problem about it? And then we look at the input variables to see if they are reasonable. Does that affect business intuition? And there are any important variables missing? So the last, when we talk about input variables, it's not so much a problem for pricing models, but it used a lot in statistical models. For example, when we try to predict the revenue forecast, or maybe predict the default rate of the mortgage loans or prepayment speed. So we have to really decide, because there are so many different variables to choose from. So then choose which variables will be used in model is very important. Any questions? So once we decide which methodology to use, then we have to estimate the parameters. So how do we estimate parameters? There are lots of different ways. So for the market instrument calibration, for example, when you try to calibrate volatility in Howard model, we typically look at market instruments and do that calibration. And prepayment model, they have totally different approach. They would use historical data, historical prepayment speed, and those variable information to do the calibration. And sometimes the parameter also come from expert judgment. For example, the mean reversion speed in the Howard model, it doesn't really affect the model results too much. So sometimes it's based on expert judgment. And then we talk about if the estimation approach is reasonable. For example, there's machine learning models or regression models. How do they do the calibration? How much can we explain about the results? And then the estimations robust and repeatable. That means if we change slightly of the input data, does that affect the parameter choice and output value significantly? So that's kind of some sensitivity analysis. So those are different approaches that we use to do that. Any questions? And then we talk about parameter update. So there are different types of parameter update. If we are talking about Howard models, that would be a daily process to calibrate their volatility based on market information. So in that sense, we typically approve this calibration process, but then we will require them to monitor their calibration errors every day to make sure the model is still doing a good job. And some parameter update process will actually trigger the validation. For example, for the prepayment model, which has hundreds of parameters, when they recalibrate the model, it would actually have significant or non-negligible impact on the sensitivities and on its downstream VAR model. So therefore, in that case, all the model update is required. So that needs a more thorough validation on it. That said, in practice, if there is just a small parameter tuning, they can set up a threshold saying if the materiality is immaterial, and then we'll give them a faster pass, so we don't have to check everything before they can be used in production. So that really depends on different firms' model risk policy. Any questions?
No, but I think somehow because we started a bit late, so we are running out of time.
Okay, so I'll be quick.
Wrap up in a few minutes. That would be great.
Okay, sure.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. Okay, so then we'll do the input and assumptions. So input assumptions are really to make sure the model captures how they handle the missing data and any data problems. And if there is a proxy data being used, make sure the proxy data can actually represent the missing data very well. And then we'll talk about outputs and testing. So outputs and testing, we talked about the calibration errors. So calibration error is very important to examine in both normal conditions and also stress conditions. And then we'll focus on the back testing, where it's more like comparing to actual versus model prediction. And this is very important for the prepayment model, where we can actually see if the model results actually deviates from the actual prepayment speed for various issuer, vintage, and coupons. And then auto-sample test, which is really to see the predictive power of the models for auto-sample period. And then we have sensitivity testing, which we do sensitivity testing on the model inputs, assumptions, and market conditions. This is really to make sure that the model is not too sensitive to specific certain inputs, and then assumptions as well. And then for stress testing is used to review the model performance under stress scenarios. So it's really important because a lot of models are subject to the firm's stress testing requirement or CCAR stress testing. So we want to check if the model still performs well under very large shocks. And then if the model outputs changes smoothly and the results still make sense when the shock size change gradually. Typically, we'll use like C-car shocks or a lot of parallel shocks, and just want to see where is the model's breaking point. And then there's a benchmarking. Benchmarking meaning we want to compare the model results to benchmark models methodologies. So it could be compared to an internal model, a vendor model, industry model results, or just business judgment. So that gives us some comfortable about the model results is not too deviated from industry opinion. And then for a lot of models, we also do the replication. So we want to implement it independently and to see if they can match the model results. So in a lot of cases, the replication actually would have found out many problems. So there are other tests that for specific models. For example, for derivative pricing models, we look at the convergence test to see if we have enough paths for the Monte Carlo simulation. We do the put-call parity just to check if the relationship still holds. And then when we talk about Greeks, we also look at the total Greeks versus partial Greeks. And then P&L attribution, that meaning that unexplained P&L should have like a very small impact. So I don't know when we have to end. It's like 10:10. Yeah. I think I'm just gonna stop here and then take any questions. Sorry that I already run over time.
Oh, don't worry. Don't worry. Thanks so much for your interesting talk. So, are there any questions?
I had a question. So for when you talk about when you're doing the parameter estimation, right? You say how is it when is it reasonable, right? What is how do you kind of determine if it's a reasonable estimation or parameter, or
So I think that really depends, right? So different models, you would assess the reasonableness in different ways. For example, if you calibrate the prepayment model, you will see if the parameter is reasonable. When you maybe shock a little bit on the inputs to see what's the impact on that parameter, and then you put the parameter into the whole functional form, and then to see how would that impact the final results. So there are different ways depending on specifically what model you are thinking and what parameter you are thinking about.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Sure.
Oh, okay. So because we are running late, so if we don't have any further questions, let's thank the speaker, Dr. Zhou. Thank you so much for your excellent talk. So I think like is Professor Sam here? Professor Huckabee. Oh,
yes,
okay.
I am here.
Yeah, sorry about that. Like, sorry to keep you waiting.
Well, that's all right. It's my fault for
So,
coming in a little
Professor
late.
Huckabee is the Dean of College of Arts and Sciences, and so we're very happy to have him here today to deliver a few remarks.
Yes, thank you so much, Ling. And again, I'm sorry for barging in a little bit late. I got sidetracked. This event, well, first of all, yes, my name is Sam Huckabee. I'm the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences here at Florida State and a mathematician by training. I remember well when we started the financial math program over 20 years ago, and started also this event, the financial, I guess now it's called the Quant Symposium. We used to call it the Financial Math Festival. But it has evolved over time. It's, I think, the premier event, outreach event, and symposium event for this program, and we're very proud of it. In being part of it early on, I used to run the graduate program, and I remember recruiting a lot of financial math students. Some of those have gone on. One of them I was hoping to see in Boston this past weekend, but in fact ended up not going. So wasn't able to see him. His name is Eddie Chin, and he was one of our early graduates before it was actually called financial math. I don't want to take too much of your time here, but I do want to express a welcome to all of you who are here, whether you're local or zooming in from elsewhere, and to all the speakers. Thank you so much for taking your time to come and join us. We have a lot of changes happening here at FSU. We hired a new president. He started about 3 months ago, came from Harvard. He is trying to figure out this place and doing a good job of it, I think. We're also doing a lot of hiring of faculty, and that's an exciting time for our faculty here to kind of expand. We have a few other things going on that are interesting and relate, I think, to the discipline. We'll call it a discipline of financial mathematics. We have a data science degree program that we're now offering. I think it will expand. Data science is, of course, ubiquitous across the sciences now. And when we're talking about finance and anything near mathematics, of course, we're often talking about data, at least when we deal with applied mathematics. That's about all I think I'm going to say. Again, I want to welcome you. I'm sorry I'm late, but I did get to catch a little bit of that last talk, and I was happy to do that. And I'm going to stick around and listen to a little bit of this next one as well. So thank you so much, Lane.
Okay, thank you very much, Sam. Next, I'll introduce the second speaker today, Zailei Chen. Zailei was actually my former student, and so he graduated from Wuhan University, and then came to FSU for PhD. And he graduated in 2018, and so has been working in city Tampa ever since then. And so he's currently a vice president there. Zailei, do you want to share the screen? Or okay, I think you already shared the screen.
Yeah. Thank you for the introduction. Actually, I just realized I have a similar topic as Dr. Zhou. So Dr. Zhou already have an excellent talk, and mostly she covered mostly of my topics. But anyway, I just give a high level introduction of what model risk management is like in banks like Citi. And also before that, I just want to make some advertisement, because like our team is hiring, and I work in wholesale credit risk model validation team, and our team, and I know some other teams like the pricing team, the market risk team, they're also hiring. So we have locations mainly in Tampa and also in New York. So if you and your friends are looking for jobs, just feel free to shoot me an email, and also you can find me on LinkedIn if you're interested. Okay, and okay, so for model risk management, first want to talk is what is model? I think
Sorry, I think are you on the first page, or like, because I didn't? So are you like
so this is the first page.
I see, because I didn't see the title of the first page. I was wondering if like you cut it off or somewhere.
We're seeing a Word document, not a presentation. Just want to verify you're sharing the correct screen.
Okay. So let me see. Just bear with me.
You might need to stop your share and then reselect the right window.
So can you see my
All right, now it
now?
works. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah. So the topic is about model risk management for banks. So first, what is a model? So model is a quantitative method, system, or approach that applies statistical, economic, financial, or mathematical theories, techniques, and assumptions to process input data into quantitative estimates. So on the model side, we have mainly three components. So first is information input. So in this one, it delivers assumptions and data to the model. And the second component is processing component. So this transforms inputs into estimates. And next component is reporting. So this translates the estimates into useful business information. Okay. So next, what is model risk? So as you know, financial models have widely been used in the past decades. So instead, with advances in computing power and software. So, but on the other side, the use of models will invariably presents model risk, which is a potential for adverse consequences from decisions based on incorrect or misused model outputs and reports. So model risk can lead to financial loss, poor business and strategic decision-making, or damage to a bank's reputation. So model risk mainly come from two sources. The first is that the model may have fundamental errors or may produce inaccurate outputs when we view against the design objectives and intended business uses. So for example, the mathematical calculation and quantification exercise underlying any model generally involves application of theory, choice of design and numerical routines, and also selection of inputs and estimates. And the implementation in information systems. So errors can occur at any point from the design through the implementation. And also some shortcuts, simplifications, or approximations used to manage the complicated problems could compromise the integrity and reliability of outputs from those calculations. And also, model outputs depends on the quality of input data and assumptions. So any errors from the inputs or assumptions will lead to the inaccurate outputs. So the other source is that the model is about the model usage. So the model may be used incorrectly or inappropriately. Even a fundamentally sound model producing accurate outputs may still exist high model risk if it is misapplied or misused. So models by the nature are simplifications of reality and real world events, may prove those simplifications inappropriate. So this is even more of a concern, like if a model is used outside the environment, which is what it was originally designed for. So also for banks, they may do this intentionally as they apply existing models to new products and markets. So decision makers need to understand the limitations of a model and to avoid using it in the way that is not consistent with the original intent. Okay. So any questions so far? Okay, so just stop me anytime if you have any questions. So next one, I'll talk about how does the model risk management framework work? So as you know, required by the Fed, they provide a guidance which is called SR 11.7. So bank organizations should be attentive to the possible adverse consequences, including financial loss of decision based on models that are incorrect or misused, and should at those consequences through active model risk management. And also, model risk management begins with robust model development, implementation, and use. So another essential element is like a sound model validation process, which I will mainly cover in this talk. So the third element is the governance, which sets an effective framework with defined roles and responsibilities for clear communication of the model limitations and assumptions. Also, they have the authority to restrict the model usage. Okay. So next is about model risk management framework. So you can see the flow chart here. There are 4 steps. So first is model development and implementation. The second is model validation. And the third will be a model use after the model is approved. And the last one is monitoring the model risk. And also there's a model governance who will be involved in this whole process. So as I mentioned earlier, they will set the effective framework and the procedure, and also they track the progress of each model, and they help us communicate with regulators, and also they have the authority to restrict the model usage. Okay. So first I'll talk about the, in the framework is model development and implementation. So model sponsors, which is the actual user of the model, they initiate the model development and they must ensure that the models are properly developed. So model developers is the one who actually developed the model according to the requirement from the model sponsors. So they must ensure that the design, theory, and logic of models are well documented, model perform as intended and appropriate for the intended business use. And the models will, must be conceptually sound and analytically correct. So in our Citibank's the model will finally present a report, which is called the model development document, to our validation team to start the validation process. So next I will talk about some key aspects of model validation. So model validators, we assess model risk, perform effective challenge to the model conceptual soundness, design, and construction. And we perform incremental analysis and testing as necessary. So model validators verify that the model are performing as expected and in line with the design objectives and business use. Okay. So first area in model validation is assessment of modeling data. So there are 3 areas. The first is the assessment of the relevance of the modeling development data towards the modeling objectives. And the second is data sufficiency. So I will give you an example, which is a model I'm currently working on. So this is a regression-based model to forecast the mortgage rates. So the model is used for CCAR purpose. As you know, CCAR is an annual exercise by the Fed to assess whether large banks have the sufficient capital. So for this model, in terms of data sufficiency, the aspects I'm taking is that the data should cover sufficient time period. It should cover like at least one economic cycle, for example, from 2001 to 2009. And also the data should include like 2 economic downturn period, like the financial crisis from 2008 to 2009, and they should also cover the recent COVID pandemic period. So this ensures that the data has sufficient history for forecasting purpose and also allow the model to capture behavior across different economic regimes. Also, the data should come with sufficient granularity. So as required by CCAR, so we need to have the data come in quarterly. So the next area is about data quality control. So first we need to assess whether the source of the data is reliable. And also we check for outliers and missing values. And also we check for stationarity. So for some input data, the developer will perform like transformations, like first difference or log first difference, to make sure that the data used is stationary. So we will do the statistical test to make sure that the data after transformation will be stationary. Okay, so any questions so far? Okay, so next area is about the assessment of modeling approach. So first is a justification of modeling approach. The first item is about assessment of model assumptions. So for like regression model, we need to test for the assumptions of regression, like the autocorrelation, the heteroscedasticity, the multicollinearity, something like this. And also the second item is about variable selection. So this can be done both like qualitatively and quantitatively. So on the qualitative side, so we need to review the some industry literature about how the variable will be selected according to the modeling objectives. And also on the quantitative side, we need to do some analysis on the variable selection, for example, the stepwise selection, also the PCA dimension reduction, and also we will need to do some correlation analysis between dependent variables and independent variables. So the second area is about alternative approach. So in the model I'm working on, so that model is like GLS, which is a generalized linear square method. So I compare this methodology with an alternative like OLS, which is an ordinary linear square approach. Then I analyze the advantage and also limitation for each method. So I will also talk about in the testing section. Okay, so yeah, next is the performance testing. So usually we have like 5 areas of testing we need to do. First is sensitivity and the stability test. So the purpose of sensitivity test is to check the impact of any small changes in inputs or parameters, if they have to make sure that the with the shocked value of these inputs and parameters, the model output will still fall within expected range. So unexpected large change in outputs may indicate that the model is unstable. Also, we do a stability test. So this is an implicit assumption for like all regression models. So the purpose of this test is to make sure that the coefficient remain constant across observations, which also means that there's no structure break. So for this test, we really, for the regression, we really use Kusum and Cho test, and also a walk forward test. So the walk forward test is to change the end time of the calibration period and to see if the parameters are stable. Okay. So next test is about the backtesting. So the backtesting was performed by comparing the error metrics. We really use mean absolute error, mean absolute percentage error, mean square error, and to calculate the forecast generated by the model against the actual observed value. So for the models I'm validating, so the backtesting it was done on 2 periods. So one is stress periods from 2008 to 2010, which is a global financial crisis time. And the other time period I tested for the most recent time period. So because the model was used for CCAR and they require like 9 quarters of forecast, so the backtesting should also be done in 9 quarters for the outer sample testing. Okay. And next is the benchmark, as I just mentioned. So I benchmarked the original GLS model with an OLS approach. So I compare the error metrics as well as the model goodness of fit. So, and I confirmed that the original model outperforms the benchmark model. So the next test we need to do is a COVID analysis. So as required by the bank, so for each model validation, we should include the COVID-19 analysis to see how the model performs during the pandemic time period. So this was done by comparing the backtesting with or without the COVID time period, which is from 2020 Q1 to 2020 Q4. And next test for the regression models, we also need to test for the model assumptions like multicollinearity, normality, heterostaticity, and autocorrelation, and also like residue stationary. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Can you tell us about the specificity of the COVID-19 test compared to any other benchmark test? Like what are there any parameters that you push more because of COVID-19? Is it something like that?
Yeah, we will assess the performance of the model within the COVID period and compare with the performance without the COVID period for each variables. Yeah, to see.
So what is the specificity of the COVID period for the models then? Is it, I mean, are you saying we have low interest rate, or like, can you tell us more or no?
For example, yeah, for the unemployment rate during COVID period, we observed that the unemployment rate will be higher than the time without the COVID, and also the GDP will be less than the time without COVID. Yeah. Okay. So actually, yeah. Also for on the back testing side, the error metrics actually will be higher because the model is not performing that well by forecasting the like macroeconomic variables. So the actual value will be like deviate more from the model forecast value. So in this case, we will like ask the developer to consider to recalibrate the model, and also we will like raise some model limitations and ask them to resolve these limitations within a certain time period.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, next is about model risk rating. So one important aspect of model validation is that we need to assign a risk rating to each model after validation review. So from high, medium to low. So to assign this rating, we have like several factors need to take into consideration. For example, the model exposure, the model criticality of use, the model input, its output and stability, and also interconnectivity with other models. Yeah, some aspects like this. So for each of these factors, we will assign a score from 0 to 2. The 0 means low, 2 means high. And then we will calculate aggregated score, and we decide the final risk rating according to the range of the aggregate score. So model risk rating is an important determinant of the intensity and the frequency of the model validation activities, including ongoing monitoring and ongoing model validation. So the next is about model use. So when the model is validated and approved, the model sponsors must ensure that the implementation of validated and approved models must be in a controlled environment, and the model use is in accordance with approved usage and applications. Also, model sponsors need to ensure that there's a control in place to prevent the use of unapproved models and the use of models outside of the approved usage. Yeah. So after like models put into production environments, we need to also assess the UAT task, which is to compare the model output in the development environment with the model output from the production environment to make sure that those two results are consistent. Okay, next is about how to monitor model risk. So the model after validation doesn't mean that it comes to the end of the life cycle. We need to also monitor the model risk at like a timely basis according to the its model risk rating. So for models in City, we need to do like annual model review on a yearly basis, and also we have to do the ongoing validation, which we call revalidation, and also ongoing monitoring assessment. So the model revalidation and ongoing performance assessment was done at the frequency determined by the model risk rating. So the higher the model risk rating, the higher frequency that the model will be reviewed. Okay. Also, during the validation, we and the developer will like come to an agreement on the performance plan. So yes, for the ongoing performance analysis and annual model review, they need to perform a certain task according to the plan we agreed. Okay, so next, the last one is about some technical skills required for model validated. So first is on the quantitative side, we are looking for some knowledge in statistics, algebra, calculus, SD, and so on. And also on the programming side, our team really use SAS, R, and Python. So we not only need to like read through developers' code, and also we need to be able to like write our own code for the incremental test. And also we need some knowledge, actually very basic knowledge about financial product, economics, and regulation. Yeah. So I think, yeah, that's it for the topics I want to cover today. So any questions?
Oh, thank you, Sally, for an excellent talk. Thanks so much. Are there any questions from the audience? Well, I have a question. So I'm just wondering, like, just for the model validation team, like, what's the challenges like that arises after COVID-19? Like, is there anything new or different compared to pre-COVID-19?
Yes, yeah, that depends on the types of model. So I think for our models on the macroeconomic forecasting models, yeah, we saw some like large discrepancies from our model output with historical the actual value during COVID. So yeah, in this case, actually in our bank we have we established a redesign team. Actually, they are developing some new techniques to forecast those microeconomic variables, and they want to compare the performance with the existing scenario design models. And if the redesign model performs better, then probably we will replace the existing models with redesign models. Yeah, so a lot of discussions have been going on from the senior management side on this. Yeah, actually, it's like very large activities recently for our team. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. I think like I think if we don't have further questions, like I'll introduce the last speaker today, Jen Lee. I think Jen is on Zoom. Right. I think you unmuted yourself. Like so, Jen did a PhD also at FSU with Professor Nick Kogan, I think, in math biology. And I remember like I had many interaction with Jen like when he was a student here, and so he did an internship in an insurance company, and then like had a brief maybe 6 months or something like that, like a stay at like a Liberty Mutual insurance company in Boston before he moved to Amazon as an applied scientist. Today he will talk about causal machine learning. And actually, like just a couple of days ago, one of my colleagues told me that causal machine learning is very hot and these days. And so I'll be very happy to hear what Jen is going to tell us today.
Right, thank you, Dr. Zhu, for the invitation and the introduction. Let me share my screen first, and then we can start. Can you see my screen? I hope I.
Yes, I can see your screen, and
awesome.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Okay. All right, yeah, hello everyone. I'm very happy to come back to our department and give the talk. Today I will talk about causal inference in machine learning. The goal of the topic is just to give a very brief overview about when we use machine learning in the real application, what challenge we have and how the causal machine learning can help in this area. So only three parts of today's talk. Firstly, I will briefly introduce machine learning, just in case some of you may heard it, some of you don't know what it is. The second one, I will talk about what do we mean by bias when using machine learning, especially for some treatment effect problems. And the last, I will talk about some examples about causal machine learning. So what is machine learning? I think some of you may heard about, some of you may not. So machine learning is a study of algorithms that build models based on historical data in order to make precise predictions. The problems can be divided into supervised learning, such as regression, classification, or unsupervised learning, like clustering or reinforcement learning. Those are all machine learning problems. Machine learning has been widely used in industry. The applications include in medicine, email filtering, speech recognition, and computer vision. So here I just found an example online. This is probably one of the examples make machine learning famous. It can help detect cancer. So you have different types of cancer, and those input data are images. By building a machine learning, the goal is to get the right class of different type of cancers. You can predict the cancer with a high accuracy, and this doesn't have to be a different type of cancer. Usually it's just one type of cancer, and the machine learning model can help to see if the patient actually got the cancer or not. I think there are at least a couple of papers in this area in Nature, just machine learning help in detect cancer. The next one is, this is Amazon Alexa. So this is a smart speaker. You can see instead of using the image as the input, Alexa take the human's voice as the input and apply machine learning and the natural language processing techniques to interact with the user. The last one is in Prime. I personally, I'm in the Prime team right now in Amazon. So in Prime, you have different benefits. For example, you can get free shipping, everyone. And most people join Amazon because you get free shipping. That's awesome, 2-day shipping. And some other benefits, you can also stream videos, free videos. Those videos are Amazon originals, such as Jack Ryan. We have Lord of the Rings in the future as well. You can also download some free books. One of the application of machine learning in Prime is based on the user's historical benefit usage, their behavior. Then we try to find out our potential Prime members, and hopefully those members, we try to get them join Prime, can stay longer, like 6 days, at least stay 6 days. So again, machine learning can help us to get the segment of customers, and our target marketing team can go ahead to give them promotion or some discount to let them join the Prime. So that's one of the application. So I would still like to talk about some commonly used machine learning algorithms before I going forward, because some of the causal machine learning methodology is still based on those what I call the regular machine learning algorithms. The first one is random forest. Random forest is averaging decision tree outcomes. So features are selected and split in order to minimize a certain criteria like cross entropy or submean square. So basically, random forest is just averaging the tree results. It's usually preferred in real application because the variance has been reduced because of this averaging scheme. And also the training time is usually not that bad, even though you have 1,000 tree, a few thousand trees, because each tree is built independently. So you can parallel building trees and average the result at the end. The next one is a boosting method. Similar to random forest, in boosting, you still have decision tree as the individual learner. But the difference is instead of building trees independently, so gradient boosting starting from a single tree, and you keep adding other individual learners, such as the combined model would be more powerful. So that is how you boost. So each tree is dependent on the previous existing model. The next one is artificial neural network. So there are many ways to explain what is artificial neural network. Here I just choose a way I think that's most intuitive. when you have a feature set, you have your response variable. You can just, for example, for classification problem, you just use a logistic regression, for example. You can use your original feature to help you determine is this class 1 or class 0 type of thing. Artificial neural network is just transform your data sets in a nonlinear way in multiple times. If you transform like 100 times, you have 100 hidden layers. Those hidden layers really nothing but just the transformation of your original feature set. And at the end, you use to transform the data set to help you to decide which class in classification part, which class is 1 or 0. If you have multiple classes, it can help. It's really powerful in terms of prediction. Sometimes it's overfitting in practice. So practitioners use dropout or cross validation to make sure they don't overfit. Some other algorithms like support vector machine, cluster algorithms, etc. So machine learning are really good in terms of prediction accuracy. So that is how the design of the machine learning. However, those algorithms are designed to reduce the value of the cost function, not accurately estimate the effect of certain variable of interest. Here's an example. In Amazon, so we have a model to predict how much each customer spend on shopping. This is just based on their historical shopping behavior or their, in Amazon behavior, we can see, oh, maybe customer A will spend like $100 in this month. But more importantly, we want to know what is the effect of their spending of being a Prime member. What this means, so for example, in our customer base, a Prime member, we have non-Prime member. We can predict how much they spend. However, that doesn't tell us more. What action should we take, right? How do we, with knowing those information doesn't help us that much. But what's really important is if we know for some customer, if we turn them into a Prime member, then maybe their shopping could be, increase a lot, maybe triple, doubled. Then those would be our high value customers. So knowing the effect of being a Prime member on their spending would be really important for us, and it's helping us to make strategic investment. So that's why at least in Prime team, not all of the problem in our team is about prediction. We also cares about the treatment effect of some certain variables. So that's why causal inference and machine learning, we do a lot of research in this area. However, once you have your data, you have your model, you cannot just use the regular machine learning algorithm I talked before to estimate treatment effects directly. So the one reason I think this paper gave a really good example is Carolyn's paper in 2007. It's showing that random forest feature importance is biased. So for example, you have 5 features. They are equally informative. But if you do a random forest, it shows, oh, X5 is the most important one. Although importance is not the same as treatment effect, but it's kind of a proxy, and at least you cannot trust, oh, X5 is the most important. Similarly, in that paper, the example giving, oh, I have X2 as the most relevant variables to the response variable, most informative one. Random forest still give kind of the wrong importance. So the paper lists a couple of reasons for that. The first one is random forest prefer variables with more categories. That is how the splitting rule is done and how the design of the random forest. Also, sampling with replacement also introduce bias in terms of estimating the importance. So that paper gives more examples than these two I got from there, but I think this is help us understand, okay, random forest, the feature importance cannot be trusted to use like the treatment effect or proxy. Although this feature is good in terms of prediction, so that is the difference. And also different machine learning is biased in different ways. here I just give an example for random forest, but neural network also biased in terms of treatment effect estimation. We can talk about a little bit about it later. So causal machine learning, still using the model machine learning algorithms is because its predict power is good. It's better than the classic traditional model. But the causal machine learning will try to estimate the unbiased treatment effect. Here, I will give 3 examples. Those are the papers in the recent paper published. Those papers talk about how they use modern machine learning algorithms to estimate unbiased treatment effect. The first one is a generalized random forest. This is the paper published by IC 2018. The second one is a deep instrument variable. The third one is deep bias and double machine learning. So the authors of the second paper and third paper, they are current Amazon scholars. So what they're doing is just doing research in this area. The results, this double machine learning has been used by quite a lot of Amazon teams, as I know, very useful. Okay, so the GRF, generalized random forest, here is just a toy example. We can think about GRF trying to solve the problems is y equals, the individual treatment effect multiply a binary variable plus a nonlinear function of x plus epsilon. It's a really simple problem. The goal is just to get unbiased individual treatment effect of theta of wi. In our example, you can think wi is being prime member or not. Y is just how much you spend. We are trying to estimate, can we get this effect of being a prime member? If so, that would be really useful information for us. Again, so I will just give very brief overview. So there are so much details in the paper. Here, I just want to list how different is the generalized random forest compared with random forest. So GRF will, at the end will estimate or minimize the weighted scoring function. So this weight is the individual weight given by the random forest. So if you know random forest, random forest give you the regular random forest will give you the prediction directly, because when they're splitting the feature, it's trying to reduce the prediction error. But generalized random forest will just give you that alpha weight to weight the scoring function, and at the end you will solve that weighted scoring function. So this alpha will be given by the forest, measuring how often each sample falling into the same leaf as the test point x. So the main idea is splitting rule in generalized random forest is different. It's trying to, instead of trying to minimize the prediction error, it will each node estimate the treatment effect by either two-stage least square or some gradient tree, and just splitting the feature in terms of reducing the error of the treatment effect instead of prediction error. Also, what is the very nice property of this theta is that we can not only get the estimate of the theta by generalized random forest, and we can also get the confidence interval. This is a really nice property, and it's proved in theory by IC in 2018. So this is property, when people use random forest, it's really lack of theory about any, those nice properties behind it. But generalized random forest proposed by IC proved is asymptotically normal. I will give some result example at the very end after I talk all the 3 methodologies. So this is GRF. It's different from random forest. It can give you unbiased treatment effect. The next one is the deep instrument variable. So the author of this paper is currently a VP in Amazon. So The problem is we try to predict the sale of the airline under the intervention of ticket price. So this is a very practical problem because, you know, I want to know if I increase the price of tickets, what's the impact of the sales? So that's a very natural problem to ask from the business side. So the algorithm, the model is to design to answer this type of question. I change my price, what would be the sale based on the historical data, not based on the experiment yet. So here, one important concept is the counterfactual prediction. It's trying to recover the expectation of Y on condition of do P and X. So the do operator indicate that we intervene the treatment variable P. In this example, is the price of the ticket. So we call the counterfactual prediction as H. So we're assuming the expectation of the error term is 0 unconditionally, but in our settings, this error could correlate it with the treatment variable P. So this is a very commonly seen confounding problem, because in reality, you can get all the features you want. Some of the unobserved features you cannot get is correlated with your treatment variables. So we need to really be careful I will talk a little bit about later in later slide, but this is really important setting here. So the goal, again, the aim of this model is just try to get H, the counterfactual prediction. So here H will be a functional form. It could be neural network. It could be some, any nonlinear functions. The goal is just to get this counterfactual prediction and getting these function forms. Again, it's very useful because we try to know if I increase my current ticket price, let's say $50, what would be the drop of my sale? So we are trying to answer this type of question. From the paper, it's also mentioned standard machine learning give the bias estimation. The reason why is this error term won't cancel out. Because in our setting, we have the confounding problem. The E and the P are correlated. So this guy could be large and positive. If so, if you just build a machine learning of P and X predicting Y, and you do this type of exercise, intervention exercise, what you may get is I increase the price of my ticket from P0 to P1, my sales go up. Because this error is there, we have the unobserved error there. So this is really misleading, right? Because we know the fact if I increase the price, only increase the price, not the quality of my service or something like that, we would expect the drop of the sale. So that's why blindly using standard machine learning in this type of problem give you the misleading, will give you totally the wrong answer. The solution provided by the deep instrument variable is firstly introduce instrument variable Z. This is unconditionally independent of the error term. What most importantly is Z only affect Y through P. We will talk a little bit about it later. So basically the idea of the instrument variable is trying to break the correlation between P and the error term. So the model is trying to use the integration of the counterfactual prediction on the probability, on the distribution of your treatment variable, such that this one will be close to the observed response variable Y. So two-stage in deep IV. Again, very brief overview about the steps of deep IV. Firstly, we build a neural network to estimate the treatment variable distribution. This is just a fitting problem. So the closer, the better. The next one, we will try to sample from the stage 1's estimated distribution of the P, and then minimize the following equation to get our counterfactual H. So H is also a neural network. the weight of the neural network will be determined by minimizing this function. At the last, I will talk about the D-bias and double machine learning. I know this method has been used in Amazon in multiple teams. The problem is classic partial linear regression problem. Both y and d are function of x. The goal is still to get the unbiased estimate of d, because people want to know when they wiring this d variable, what the effect of y. In the paper, it's mentioned the regularization bias from the standard machine learning models is also a major source of the bias. For example, if I just build a neural network of y and g and subtract the fitted model g hat on both sides, then it's come to a linear regression. I just multiply the inverse of the d square. I can get the estimate of theta. But this way, you will get a super biased estimate in terms of compared with the true effect. So the main idea of the double machine learning is overcome this bias by orthogonalization. So instead of using the actual D, the double machine learning will firstly factor out the effect of X from D and only use the residual from this model for estimate of the theta, to estimate the theta. In double machine learning, we have first step, we split the training sample into 2 subsamples. And in the first sample, we will calculate the residual of the D, and this M hat 0 could be any machine learning model. So you basically build any model and factor out the effect of D from X from D. Similarly, we can also build any machine learning model for Y of X, and you factor out the effect of X from Y as well, and you get the residual of Y. And in sample 2, we just use the least square to estimate the theta by the residual we get from the second step. Because right now everything has been orthogonalized. Orthogonalization will make the estimate theta unbiased because everything here is a residual. This kind of the partial confounding problem is solved. Here, it's also important to have the cross-fitting, because the idea is you calculate the residual in one sample, but you estimate the effect in the different sample. So this is the most convincing results from the paper is if you compare with your estimated theta with the true theta. Again, here everything is the synthetic data, meaning those data is generated. We have the generated, we generate the data generating process, and we know what is the true theta. And if you compare with the difference between the two, so the double machine learning will give you, the difference kind of standard normal. That means you don't bias your estimate. However, if I mentioned before, if you use just to use, machine learning to solve this problem, your estimate is highly biased, and your result would be misleading. And this, you will observe similar result in DeepIV or generalized random forest. The whole idea is getting this difference between your estimated effect and the true effect, the difference standard normal. Yeah, I probably talked too much about details. Again, a summary is like standard machine learning models could be heavily biased when estimate treatment effect. Although the prediction is good. Don't get me wrong, I mean, in Amazon, we still have a lot of problems, just we care about prediction. So machine learning is still widely used in Amazon, for sure. It's just in some case, when we try to estimate the treatment effect, we figure out machine learning will give misleading results. So causal machine learning, causal inference and machine learning, the combination come to help. And these algorithms can help us to estimate the treatment effect in an unbiased way, but still using machine learning. You can see GRF using random forest, DeepIV using neural network, it can recover the unbiased treatment effect. The goal of the talk is just give give you an overview about when we use machine learning, when we care about causal inference, there are some options we can use for machine learning and causal inference, combination of those to help us. And there are many other algorithms besides the three I introduced today. So if you're interested about this area, I think these three papers are good starting point, and you can find a lot of research still, people still doing research in this area. So thank you. That's the end of my talk.
Oh, thank you, Jen. That's a very interesting talk. Thank you so much. Are there any questions from the audience? No questions. Okay, so I'll just ask a quick question because, like, actually, I'm not familiar with like causal machine learning, but I remember that, like, seeing in one of your slides, you mentioned that if you do like a sampling with replacement, it can create a bias. Like, I'm just wondering, like, is there something like, is this something just has having an easy fix? I mean, why can't you just do something without replacement then? Because I think sometimes people also do something without replacement, right? Would that immediately solve the problem, or it will not?
Yeah, so in my slide, there are two reasons. The first is like sampling with replacement will introduce bias, but the tree, the individual tree of the random forest, how they split in the feature is also introduced bias. Okay. So that's why in, am I still sharing the screen? I think I do. Yeah, so in my previous example, you can see the random forest with replacement or without replacement will both give you the bias, because how you split in the feature will bias the estimate, because in the random forest or the trees prefer the features with more categories. But even if you binary features is the most important one, but more features tends to get more selected in terms of splitting. So that's why the X5, you can imagine that's X5, the example I gave before, always get the highest importance because that has more category.
I see. Okay, I got it. Because like, so you are talking about the context of random forest. Like, okay, I see. Because like the sampling without with replacement and without replacements that I'm familiar with is more like in the SGD algorithm. Like, because in SGD algorithm, like there's also like with replacement, with something without replacement, etc.
Got it.
Right, but there might be something similar, like that might also create some bias there. I need to think about it, but like that's interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so are there any other questions?
May I have a question?
Oh, okay, sure.
Yes, Dr. Lee, thank you for the talk. And you're talking about the causal inference model and compared to some traditional, the other machine learning models. Why do you think the causal inference model can have more unbiased estimate of the achievement effect?
Yeah.
You have three examples here, but I'm not very sure. It looks like there are also some kind of deep learning or machine learning models. But why do you think they can have more unbiased estimate of the achievement effect?
Yeah, a good question. Is like so the three examples I give here, the model are designed differently from the, for example, let's take the generalized random forest as example. So this one is designed to get the unbiased treatment effect, because although it's still using random forest, but instead of just minimizing the in-sample prediction error as the random forest does, this generalized random forest splitting in a different way. So the way they design for splitting will give you a weight such that you can use the weight to minimize your scoring function. And in that example, that means because the design of the algorithm is still using random forest, but designed to minimize the error of the treatment effect, essentially. So that's how that one is unbiased. And you think about the double machine learning one, you use the neural network directly, you get a bias. You can see the example at the end I gave. But double machine learning is designed by orthogonalization, meaning it's only it will factor out all the correlations between that can be affect your treatment effect, such that that's why in cross-fitting at the last step, you only do the least square on the residuals. That means everything has been orthogonized and your treatment effect will be unbiased. And there are theories in the paper, each step and in equations proved this is unbiased. So back to your question, it's like, it's because those algorithms are designed to be unbiased and proved in the paper. So that's why I compare to the commonly see machine learning, which has lack of theory about any treatment effect estimations. So that's why those are unbiased.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, do you think the causal inference models are more interpretable than the other machine learning models?
Definitely. These are definitely interpretable. You know, for the, like I mentioned, for some of the most of problems in Amazon, we still care about prediction. We don't care about the interpretation in a lot of ways. However, the reason why we try to read those papers and try to apply some of the methods in our problem is because those effects is interpretable. You can tease in those variables and conduct analysis. So that's why this is definitely interpretable. Yeah.
A final question. I look at the GRF, that the generalized random forest. Look at your formula. It seems you have two functions, the theta xi and the fxi, and you also have the wi as parameters. Do you think this model is, a little bit over parameterized? And you're saying, that this model is more interpretable than the traditional random forest. But if I look at your formula, it seems this model is more parameterized than the traditional one. So why do you think it's more interpretable and it's more unbiased estimate?
Got it. A good question. So I mean, the interpretable is like that theta in front of the W is interpretable, but not the F one. So F is the is like could be anything. We don't know anything about the interpretability or the effect of anything about the F, but only the theta, that's the individual treatment effect of the W. So an example I give is in Amazon example. So that W could be being a prime membership, like the US prime or not. The theta is the effect of being prime member on your spending. So we only interpret that variable, not others. So the generalized random forest give you at least one interpretable parameters for one treatment variables. Yeah, okay, but for random forest,
thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, thank you very much. So so Jen, so basically my understanding is that those double machine learning and the causal machine learning method, it's still like a machine learning method, right? It's basically like some traditional machine learning method plus some trick, let's say orthogonalization or some other kind of trick to debiasing, to get.
I believe so. I definitely agree with you. Yeah.
So we will plan to start a job panel discussion. So the first speaker today, Dr. Jing Zhou, she's not available after the first talk, and that's why she gave the first presentation. But we are happy to have Jen Li from Amazon, Zai Chen from Citi to join us for the job panel. So actually, on Zoom, we also very happy today to have David Mandel. So David was also a FSU alumni. So he also agreed to join us on the job panel today. So basically, the format is that you can leave the question to me on the chat box, and then I'll relay the questions to Jen Li and Zaile and David. So my understanding is that David still works at JP Morgan in New York, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. So I think David was a student of Dr. Giray Okten.
Yeah, hi, Dr. Zhu. I'm
hi,
actually
David.
I'm actually at RBC now,
Oh, okay.
downtown. I moved there about a year ago, so I'm working with another one of Professor Okten's student, Lin, who you may recall as well, or
Oh,
maybe
right,
did work with us
right. I
before.
think Lin was on Zoom also earlier today.
Sounds right. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. So I think like for the students, like maybe like you can just send me the questions on like the chat box, and so I'll like relay all the questions to the speakers. But like maybe let me just first asking you some question, because like these days like I remember that one graduated from PhD program in 2013, and at that time like machine learning was not a big thing. And also, as far as I understand, at that time at JP Morgan there was no like a machine learning group. But I heard from some friends that like these days at JP Morgan, for example, they have a big machine learning group, and actually it's one of the most popular department for the job applicants. I also heard that at Goldman Sachs they also had some like machine learning type of group headed by some former computer science professors of, so I'm just wondering like. Is that also a trend at RBC and the city? Like that in financial companies, you see more development and in machine learning, and also also in terms of like a model validation, like work, like do you see like there's also a trend of adopting like machine learning techniques? In contrast to some more traditional like statistics method.
Yeah, at JP, they had hired Manuela Valeso, who is I think still is a professor at Carnegie Mellon, to head up their machine learning
I heard about that.
Center of Excellence. And a lot of the applications that they were interested in were really around things like credit card processing, fraud detection especially. That's where a lot of the most successful applications of machine learning had been brought to fruition, and they had some very good business success in applying that to things like fraud detection especially, and even more commercial things like they want to send out credit card advertisements. Who do we think is going to respond most favorably to these advertisements? That sort of a thing. And yeah, indeed, they've been on a hiring tear. They have a big presence in Manhattan West near Hudson Yards, where they've set up a whole machine learning center of excellence. But at a place like JP, and probably like City as well, they have, to put it in a social context, a FOMO, a fear of missing out. And if there is a big advance in machine learning, these companies want to be associated with it, and that's why they're willing to make all these hires, especially around machine learning, with all these pretty big names in the research, to bring them onto the company. And now I'm sitting closer to trading, and I don't see like big LSTMs or this more complex sort of machine learning applications being used. And I think for two reasons. One is just explainability and trying to understand what's really happening with the more high frequency trading decisions that have to be made. And two is regarding the implementation, that these models do require time to propagate through the network, and even after they're trained, maybe it is just a bunch of simple linear, maybe some nonlinear combinations they have to implement in software. But when it comes to these more low latency applications, we really have to concern ourselves with how we implement it. And so we're got to think about the simplest sort of models, which brings us back to like regression or PCA, just very simple matrix vector multiplications, that sort of thing.
Right. Okay. So maybe like maybe I should like ask you guys a question from the audience. So Ryan asked a question: what's the most in demand areas that you think will be hiring over the next few years? I think probably like that's the question that students most care about. So Saile, do you want to start first or?
Yeah, sure. So on our city side, so I think as you mentioned, we are more and more used to apply some machine learning knowledge to our models. But within our group, we still use some like conservative classical approach like linear regression, logistic regression, and Cox regression. But I heard that we recently built a new team, which is called algo trading. And they are using some machine learning techniques, and also on the consumer credits risk side, they also they work on like credit card models, and they use some machine learning techniques. And I think we will be like have more positions regarding the machine learning, and also on the other side, our risk team is still growing, so we will have some many more jobs opening next year. Almost every team will still like actively hiring right now. So from my side on the wholesale credit risk, and also I heard from market risk, counterparty credit risk, and also on the rates, fixed income, and also pricing team. Also from the developer side, they're also hiring people. So I think, yeah, there'll be more jobs open for the next year or two. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So Jian Li, like Jian, do you want to mention, do you want to comment on like what's the like most in demand area at Amazon, or maybe at other tech companies in Seattle you think are hiring over the next few years?
Yeah, sure. I would say in the tech company industry, I think we're consistently hiring scientists. You can see I have friends in Microsoft, in Google. You can see the title are more like research scientists, data scientists, applied scientists. You know, those scientists are, most of us have a PhD degree. So in Amazon, we have like a few thousand scientists. You know, people titled the scientists, and we can divide it into economists. Those type of scientists, they really have required this PhD in economy. But others, for me, I'm from mathematics. I have a colleague from the statistics. You know, those scientists, they are hired to solve some real business problems. You know, in Amazon, you can think about we have 3 big org. You know, in Prime, we hire scientists to solve, you know, Prime related problems. In Alexa, you can imagine they probably have the most scientists because they need to build these machine learning, natural language processing techniques to really make Alexa better and better. And in AWS, you know, those auto scaling and AWS, they also have huge marketing team. You can imagine, you know, a colleague and I were joking, like in Amazon, in different teams, you feel like in different company because we work in so many different problems. Each team's requirement probably different. For example, not every team require machine learning. You know, some team, you know, they focus, still focus on some classic traditional models like 3D or stuff like that. So I would say in tech company, we are consistently hiring scientists, and I still think in our side when we interview, we feel like, oh, we need to, some team have 2 headcount like for a year, cannot hire 1 candidate because although we have many resume there, I think matching is really important. So I would say applying for Amazon, I would say you, at least from the student from math department, I would say we have opportunities. And I think if you have machine learning background, you will have less to prepare because you don't know which team you're going to interview. So you always want to have your, you know, this basic, you know, knowledge prepared. Depends on the team, you know, sometimes they don't require. So I would say in Amazon, just pay attention to Prime, AWS, and Alexa. Those 3 orgs keep hiring scientists. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So David, do you want to comment on like what areas are hiring? Like, have you observed?
Yeah, in finance, it's definitely a bull market in compliance and risk management as well. Like what Zale was saying, these companies will also, these large banks, I should say, to be specific, will always need model validators and risk managers to understand these models and present their findings and challenge the implementations and present those to regulators and things. And that's like, I think, in my opinion, a great way to get into these companies and explore what else is available. So that was sort of my entry point into quantitative finance as well. Was I started in a model, they call it model governance there at JP Morgan, and I joined that team looking at some algorithmic trading models, and from there branched off into pure algorithmic trading, and then moved companies. So there's a lot of good opportunities to meet folks and learn more about how these models are used in quantitative finance and trading by getting into risk management. And it fits in well because that's where so many of the jobs are recently, and probably will be for the next several years, as people rely more and more on models, and the regulatory regime is such that they're enforcing banks to really understand what's going on and demonstrate that they understand the risks.
Okay, so David, actually, like since you are speaking, like I have a question from Luke for you. So he's asking, like, do you see a potential for machine learning or quantitative methods being introduced in more of a long-run economic context? Like an example being how much a firm should allocate to long-term deflationary bets based on government debt ratios, i.e. lazy hunt strategy versus how much a firm should protect against short-term rises in price levels, and also what skills would you recommend cultivating for someone with a bachelor's in economics, but also currently getting a bachelor's in computer science if they are looking to get into quant trading or an economic analysis field?
Yeah, I'll start with the last part. I think like good software skills and passion and energy for implementing code, it can really bring you far. And so if you have a tilt toward computer science, make a GitHub page, put it out there, put it on your resume, demonstrate the passion that you have for this. And especially if it's around quantitative trading, there are a lot of opportunities. Like my team is trying to hire now for a computer science background, and it's tough to find good. You mentioned bachelors, like it's tough to find good undergraduate, even having just graduated talent that can implement performant low latency code that we would need. And on the first part on machine learning, sure, like I think everyone's open to new trading strategies and ideas, especially around allocation of balance sheet. So if you have some thoughts around how to think about that, and then if you can present it in a meaningful way, then especially in this very much inflationary environment, I think people would be interested to kind of hear how that could play out.
Okay, thank you, David. I have a question like from like Ryan again. Like he's asking like in the previous years, like so some of the like graduates like who stand out was those who did maybe some specific individual projects. Maybe like I think my understanding of his question was that like because different PhD students work on different projects during their PhD, right? So maybe like some PhD students, they stood out in the job application because they did a certain type of like individual projects. And so the question is, what kind of projects they did like during their study that can make them stand out when they apply for jobs in industry? Do you want to comment on that, Jian or Zailei or David?
Yeah, I can start with some context. I think for the different type of project or the topic of dissertation would definitely helpful. I mean, in terms of the team, I would also say, for example, in the Alexa team, I was involved in one of the interview. I see, they are really hiring some talent in natural language processing. When they filtering for this team, in Alexa they have a lot of teams, but for one of the teams, they are just looking for who is doing whose dissertation is about natural language processing. And then you can see if you're doing this type of project or your dissertation is in this area, you would definitely select it, but just by this team. But in other teams in Amazon's, for us, we don't require natural language processing. For prime team, we test the statistics. We test some programming, we test some machine learning. So you can see, I would say in most of the case, your dissertations will just some add-on for you get the job opportunities. But for some specific example, for some activity they're looking for this talent, you may get a higher chance. So I would say if you're not doing natural language processing right now, don't worry about it. You can have other opportunities to join other teams. But if you are doing this type of work, you definitely have a higher chance to join the Alexa related teams. Even though you are not doing machine learning, for example, myself, my dissertation was not about machine learning either. So, but when I joined the Amazon, they tested me. They got also a PhD from mathematics to test me, like how good I am on my own area. So that's what we think is most important. Your knowledge probably won't directly be used in our team. It's good to have, but sometimes we just test if you're really good in your own area and if you are willing to learn. If we think that you're doing very well in your own area, you can still get hired and you will learn those, machine learning later on. That's fine. You will learn natural language processing later on into other team. That's also fine. So that's my comments.
Okay, thank you. Zaili, do you have a quick comment on that?
Yeah, just one little point I want to make. So when you write your experience projects on your resume, I saw some resumes, but their experience are kind of plain. But I just want to say that make sure to highlight what you have done in the projects, highlight why the method you use outperforms some other methods, so that people will see some shining point of your experience. Yeah.
Okay.
And I would add to that, adding a project, not necessarily your dissertation, because I don't think, unless you study something very specific, like in Jan's case, you did a very particular machine learning dissertation that Amazon or some hedge fund is really interested in. It's not going to be extremely applicable to, a job in general. So the projects both give you an opportunity to stand out on a resume. I think as you correctly can conjecture that it does give you something else to differentiate yourself from, hundreds, if not thousands of other students who are all doing MFEs or, PhD programs in quantitative finance. But it gives you an opportunity once you get an interview to sort of control the conversation in a productive way, because hopefully if you're doing these projects, it's something that's interested you and you know it very well, and you can talk to it and explain why you made certain choices with your design, why you chose a certain model or even programming language, and what you learned from it. And the clock's always ticking in these interviews, and so the more time you can spend in an interview discussing things that you know very well, I think your higher probability of success and moving forward.
Right, thank you. So there's a question from Sonnet. So he's asking what are the programming languages and tools we need to be good at in order to work in financial math field? But I think we can also ask the same question to work in a tech company like Amazon. Do you want to have a quick comment on that?
Yeah, I think too, pick one of C++ and Java, and then Python. If you can do one of those, like C++ or Java, just because it's a statically typed language, if you're going to be implementing more robust, larger systems, then I think almost every firm is going to want that. So to reduce the sort of runtime errors you would run up with in Python. So that's pretty a strong skill set. And then Python, just because it's so well suited for data analysis and doing quick tasks like that.
Okay, Saile and Jen, do you want to have a quick comment? Or?
Yeah, so for my team, because we develop macroeconomic forecasting models, so typically we use SAS because that's more like well studied, and for SAS we can always like ask questions to an expert and get like official response. But actually, recently we are transforming from SAS to Python and R. So yeah, I think in the future will be more used to Python and R. Yeah, and also depends on the team. Some other teams within, like the market risk team, they may use C++ or some other programming languages. But really, we don't require that kind of high standard for the coding because we're not tech companies. So yeah, like if you have a sufficient experience on those programming language, that'll be good. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a quick comment, Jen?
Yeah, similarly, I would say Python widely used in Amazon here. And if you know, some Spark is not a language, it's more like a distributed computing tool. So if I experience in Spark manipulating a large data set, that would be a plus. More team is trying to get people quickly start on large data manipulation, but that's not required. I would say Python would be enough.
Okay, thank you. So are there any other questions? Let me see from the audience. Right, but I mean, actually, I have a question. Like, so you all did a PhD like at FSU. Like, some of you did a PhD like in more like a financial math area, and Jen, in your case, you did a PhD with like Nick Kogan in math biology. So I'm wondering, like, what is it like for you to get used to transitioning from being a PhD student to a full-time worker in industry? Like, is this transition experience very smooth for you, or it takes you time, or what kind of thing you wish that you had done better when you were a PhD student so that it can make your transition easier?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would only share my experience. I would say the transition, I indeed it took me some time to get the transition done. I think a couple of months, because when I was a PhD, usually what we do right now is just reading paper, research, talking to professors, brainstorming, those things. You can take your pace, and also you have your you have the full freedom to to do your own research. And then when you work in industry, you probably will be assigned. Firstly, you will be assigned the project. You will have some guidance, and so you limit yourself of to fully to work on the project in your own way. I think in this one, sometimes you have a lot of idea. For example, for me, I propose a lot of idea, but none of them are adopted by the team or the leader. But I would say in the first few projects, you get used to the team. You just follow the guide, but later on you can definitely propose your own idea. You can also do the research, because as a PhD, I think the advantage of us is we are really quick, like by reading papers and learning new things from the paper, and then quickly implement those. Those, if you can show the value of those to the team, and there's no reason they object to you, or like some of my idea already adopted and in the production. And also I would say in the when you get to the industry, the problems is kind of new to me. I have to spend time on understanding what the business really care about. For example, Amazon, they care about customer, benefit behavior, their benefit attribution. Those concepts really take me quite a lot of time to understand, and also talk to the people in the team and leadership to ask why they care about those questions and what could be successful in my own role, because to understanding the business problem is really important and take me time. And I wish as a PhD, I wish I could be more, open-minded when I was a PhD to open mind to other, other knowledge in other area. It could be like in finance, we have this stochastic models. Could open would be great. And if there are talks or other professor comes to the department or student give a talk, I wish I had attended more, because with those open mind, you could know, you won't know all the details, but you know where to find solution, and you can in the real world you can, oh, I heard about that one, or I have seen this before, so you can quickly get started. So that's my
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Saili, do you want to comment on what's the difficult part you find in transitioning
so
current work, and also what kind of things you wish you had done?
Yes, two things I wish I could have been done better during my PhD is that first is as Jen just mentioned, during the PhD study we have less deadlines, we have some more self-control timeline, but when entering the industry we have dues almost every week, and we also we cannot focus on one project because ad hoc projects will come on a daily basis. So we need to improve our efficiency and also multitask skills during our study. And also the other thing is about, I feel that communication is very important in industry. So during the PhD, I communicate not that much really with my advisor and some colleagues, classmates. But in industry, we have to deal with different counterparties. For me, it's developers and also model governance team, and also internal audit, regulators, and also our external consultants. So we need to communicate a lot every day, and how to make things going smooth, and not make good relationships with every counterparty, but also makes your projects done on time with good quality. So that's very important skills. Yeah. So I think, those are the two skills I will have developed more during my PhD study. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. David, do you want to make a comment about your transitioning experience, and also what are the things you wish you had done when you were at FSU?
Yeah, I think that for the particular team I joined after I completed at FSU was not so different in terms of, it's a very academic group. Almost everyone else had PhDs in physics or engineering or something. So it had an academic nature to it. But yeah, there are deadlines and things to meet. Thinking back to what I was doing at FSU compared to what I think could have led to better time used, perhaps, in hindsight. Just, I think what Jen mentioned, socializing more, going to talks, meeting people, exploring both from the sense of what he mentioned of opening your mind to different ideas and ways of hearing about things and thinking about your world, but also just meeting people and networking, I think is powerful. There's so many opportunities at FSU, so many different departments having talks. I mean, pick something that interests you and you can just walk in and hear what people are talking about. And at a research institution, you're probably hearing the cutting edge as well. So it's an exciting opportunity to be there.
Right, that's a good idea. I think let's say if you plan to work in industry in the future, like maybe you should also like you can also go to like the statistics, computer science, like department seminar talks, right? And because the stuff they are doing kind of sometimes is more related to industry, and that can also broaden your knowledge base, etc., etc. Well, thank you so much, guys. I think like we are nearing the end of our original plan, like time to finish the job panel, and so if you have any further questions, you can ask like right now. Otherwise, let's thank all the speakers again. Also thank David to join the job panel. And I wish everyone have a nice weekend.